My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. The account of Pentecost in today's solemnity comes from the Acts of the Apostles. That is the first reading in today's Mass. So Pentecost was really quite like a dramatic event with its fire and the wind, this description over the apostles, the tongues of fire. Yet there is a kind of gentle prelude to this drama in the Gospel reading of today when the risen Christ, the Lord, appeared to the apostles in the upper room. We are told that the Lord breathed on them. His divine lungs were like a strong wind, a powerful gust of fresh air that revived their drooping spirits and gave them this new capacity they could never have had on their own. The capacity to offer God's forgiveness, which can only come from this new channel of grace. He breathed on them the breath of life. It's kind of like a defibrillator, awakening the life of the soul in grace. You know, when a person stops breathing, well, he's not breathing. He must be dead. But when the Lord's presence stops breathing in a soul, it's like the grace of God that suddenly ceased to give it life. It's like kind of like God's grace has died in his soul. But just like the Spirit of God hovering over the deep in the book of Genesis, that gave life to the world and all of creation, well, so too the Spirit of God can always come back to a lifeless soul, no matter how dead it seems to be. So the apostles must have been awakened at that moment, but they were also reminded from a few days before when Jesus had promised them that he would not leave them orphaned, that he would ask the Father to send them another paraclete, another advocate, the Spirit of truth, to stay with them forever. Well, that was the paraclete. Not a simple passing presence, a moment of feeling good, a transitory excitement, but the permanent presence of the real God in the church. He came from that invisible breath of Christ himself. They would experience his closeness. And indeed, Pope Francis said that when the Holy Spirit came to the apostles, he was not a passing guest who comes in to pay us a courtesy visit. No, the Holy Spirit didn't just stay for a while with those who received him then. He was here to stay with the church forever. He would reside with them in their hearts, and they would really experience his closeness. But he would make himself also present in the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, but also in the life-giving doctrines of the church. And he would give them a peace that the world cannot give. Now, Jesus, as we know, had promised that the Holy Spirit would be their advocate. You know, in French, the word for lawyer is avocat. Avocat. And it's kind of similar in Italian. They say avvocato, un avvocato. That is a lawyer. And a lawyer is the one who defends you when you're accused. And he manages to ensure that you are declared innocent. That's the purpose of a lawyer. And you know, sometimes you hear of some guy who's accused of some crime, and when the judge asks him who will defend him, who will represent him, who is the defense lawyer? And the guy often naively says, well, I will represent myself. I don't need a lawyer. Well, that's what is called the pro se legal defense. I mean, it's permitted, I think, but meaning you argue your own defense on your own behalf. Well, I don't think that usually turns out too well. They think they can defend themselves. They think they know the law or all the tricks, but they can't. And in the end, things usually work out pretty poorly for them, and often they get a much heavier sentence than they imagined. Well, Jesus wants to send the church this powerful advocate, the Holy Spirit, who will defend us from the prosecution, that is, the devil himself, who prosecutes us. And the evil one is absolutely powerless against such an advocate, such a powerful defense lawyer. Now it began as a promise in the cenacle. Then came the power of Jesus' breath about the forgiveness of sins. But then we read in the Acts of the Apostles how it all became a reality, kind of when the apostles were huddled together there together with the Blessed Mother. And it was described as a strong driving wind that made lots of noise in the house, shaking the very foundations. And then from wind and noise, the Holy Spirit appeared in tongues of fire over each of the apostles' heads. Those wisps of fire were like red hot, like fire. That's why the liturgical call of the day is this burning red, this purifying fire, which led them all to speak and to proclaim the good news of the gospel. And, well, when they spoke, they lost all their inhibitions. They lost all their nervous anxiety. They spoke with clarity. They were understandable to everyone. There were languages of all kinds and different cultures and varied people in Jerusalem. It was like a United Nations, but they all understood Peter when he spoke in the unifying language of God. Really, there was no need for translators. And when I speak of translators, well, I always remember my days in Rome when I used to help out in the Synod of Bishops there in the early 90s. I had the task of being a translator. We were like a group of, 9 or 10 guys, translators. It was a grueling task. We're in your small booth in the synodal hall there in the Vatican, and you have to listen to what some cardinal is saying, and you have to immediately translate what he's saying. You have to do it like right off the cuff. I was doing French and Spanish to English. And the first few seconds, well, it's generally pretty easy. You start, because the guy's, he has these introductory remarks of thanksgiving and appreciation, but then he starts to speed up, and he goes to the core of the argument, what he wants to say. And that, it's like sometimes hard to follow. And there are hundreds of bishops listening, and it is presided by the Holy Father, in this case, Pope John Paul II, and he's flanked there by several cardinals. Of course, Pope John Paul II, he didn't need a translation because, he knew all these languages, but all the bishops are listening intently. Sometimes you see them adjusting their headphones, and they're getting every word. And no matter how fast the speaker spoke, you just, had to keep at it. And we had on our panel there, we had a red button that would flash them a message in the audience hall. The message was, slow down, rallentare. But rarely did they pay any attention. So it was pretty stressful. And I have to say that when everybody there understood, well, these synods really did bring us together because they felt really united around the Holy Father. So, I thought actually this might be an opportunity for me to meet Pope John Paul II, even though they told us, no, don't think this is an occasion. And but in case, I did manage to get closer and closer. And then at one point, well, there I had Pope John Paul II right in front of my face, and I was introduced by him by a cardinal, and he asked me, oh, where are you from? I said, well, I'm from Canada, and I'm one of the translators. And then Pope John Paul II said in Italian, kind of jokingly, he said, un traditore. Speriamo che non sei traitore. A translator. I hope you won't be a traitor. And the cameras were snapping and clicking photos, and everybody laughed together. I hope you're a translator, not a traitor, because the two words in Italian are pretty similar, translator and traitor. And it's true, there is a danger that we all end up kind of it is a danger that we are like traitors to the faith if we're not careful. That's why we have to really defend the faith to our friends and just offer them a good explanation of the moral teachings. So when we do that, we should really invoke the advocate, invoke our defense lawyer. That's the Holy Spirit, so that we can speak correctly, so that they really understand. Maybe we just need a little bit of savoir-faire, kind of adapt ourselves to the capacities of our hearer. And that's what the Holy Spirit, our defender, our advocate, will help us to do, especially today on this day of Pentecost. He has protected the church throughout centuries, and he will help us too, so that we never be a traitor or ever betray the truth to the salvific message of Jesus. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you've communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.